So we've
Have you guys
updated
getting on
the
drafting?
draft report and it's been shipped off to Dave as version 7.
Check my junk mail again.
Should be from Olaf's.
Great, got it now. Thank you. Do you want to share your screen and run through it?
Well,
Sure.
well, I guess we can do that now.
Sorry, Sean, shall I not do that?
Well, I don't know. Do we want to do that or just get on with this the scheduled 10 o'clock session?
Up to you.
I don't think there's anything hugely controversial in there, except maybe one bullet that we wanted to run by you. So
All right, we can leave it then till after, if you
yeah,
prefer, and we can just.
yeah.
Yeah.
Why don't we defer that to this afternoon? There were a few bullets there that we were kind of needing you to have a look at to kind of wordsmith and see if they should be combined or not. So
At some stage this morning. All right. Well then, Secretary, if you could just bring up the final paper that we have to cover today. What is that number off the top of my head? It is paper 19, please. Sorry, paper 10. My bad. Fantastic. All right, we can kick off then, Chair, if you'd like.
yep, I guess this is
Okay,
you.
so, well, yeah, it's really all of us, and this is, I guess, the aim of this morning's session is not for us to sit there and present the draft plan per se, and the reason for that is it's still very much a work in progress. So we've taken on board the various comments that you made at the previous SRB meeting. We've had a number of other meetings internally to try and, I guess for want of a better description, make the plan a little bit more cohesive and a little bit more integrated in the way it's presented. We still have a lot of work to go on the plan itself. There are a number of sections that need some substantial fleshing out, including the appendices where we'll actually put those tactical matrices together of how all of the aims and objectives from the key elements of the plan in isolation come together to deliver on an overall integrated 5-year plan of science and research. So some of the key updates that we have provided, well, before I say that, one of the other things that's not reflected in here at the moment is the whole monitoring side. And so while we have the monitoring elements contained within the plan, we've agreed that we're going to sort of separate that out a little bit from the rest of the science and research that the Secretariat is undertaking. And so how that's going to be reflected, we're still working through. It will probably be a separate section towards the end. But otherwise, the plans are, as you can see, described in paper 10, and in particular the appendix to that paper itself. Giuseppe has spent a substantial amount of time putting together Appendix 1, which was the request from the SRB, highlighting sort of what happened with the previous 5-year plan, which will wrap up at the end of this year, and how that will, to a certain extent, feed into the new proposed draft plan. Which is part of paper 10. So what I'm going to suggest is, well, most of the introductory sections are pretty straightforward. It highlights sort of what are our core objectives, the areas and themes that we have targeted for this next 5-year plan. We have a very generic measure of success, or measures of success rather, and that as well is going to be fleshed out by core area, and then also how it's integrated across areas down the track a little bit. The core focal areas background, which is section 5, again, it's very generic in nature, probably not too much to be concerned about there, but it's really those next sections within section 5. So 5.1, which is the stock assessment, 5.2, the management strategy evaluation, etc. where we're trying to provide a broad overview of the work that has been done and the directions we've received from the Commission on how they would like us to move forward. We have linked a very two-line table for each of those sections, noting that most of the background information is provided on the website. And that's where we're trying to ensure that as much as possible that information is readily available to any interested stakeholders. We're trying not to populate this 5-year plan with all of that background information, as it would just become too onerous and too much heavy reading. But by providing those links and then ensuring we're updating the website pages for each of the sections, it should provide sufficient background information and current updates as the plan moves forward, such as specific research projects, specific publications. Those types of things will all be linked to the research page for that particular area. And so, for example, under 5.2, the Management Strategy Evaluation, it has the website portal link there, which will include updates to the MSAB process, the modeling updates that Alan's undertaking, and as well if there are any publications that come through throughout that 5 years. Post that, we have I guess where we really need to spend a lot more work, a lot more time on, and that's exactly how we're going to integrate everything together. And so to assist with the SRB in understanding where we're at with that, I was just going to do a round table, noting that you've already received the presentations from the various program leaders on the research that they're currently undertaking, just to give you a bit of an update on what they've changed for their particular areas and some of the discussions we've had. And so to kick that off, I'm going to ask Giuseppe, first of all, to run through Appendix 1, just on the outcomes and how you've accommodated the SRB requests to sort of summarize what's happened in the last 5-year plan with how we're going to move forward. So Giuseppe, if I could have you sort of talk about the biological ecosystem research plan and the summary that you put in Appendix 2 with this, sorry. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Yeah, as you can see in Appendix 2, this was a specific request from the SRB in the June meeting to provide a summary of outcomes from the first 5-year research plan, 2017-2021. And I've outlined the outcomes by research areas. You can see in the first page of Appendix 2. The 5 research areas, starting with migration and distribution, point 1. And without having to go through all the details in the different areas, I would just like to highlight that for each of the research areas, I've highlighted the specific research topic that has been under consideration by the Secretariat. What are the main results? What are the publications that have resulted from the work that has been conducted? What are the links for the following 5-year research plan, as you can see following up? And that's the basic structure of the update on the previous year 5-year research plan. Basically outlining, again, the main outcomes, the main products in terms of publications and grants, and the specific links to the next 5-year research plan.
Joseph, this is Kim. I guess reading this is a pre-meeting document. I didn't see that there was an emphasis on expanding results in your 5 focal areas beyond the initial data that collection. So for instance, under reproduction and growth, those data were largely collected at a point, single location, region, single time period. And, you know, one of the potential areas of expansion and one of the fundamental questions is, you know, is that characteristic of the species throughout its range? There could be compared, you know, spatial and temporal variability, and this document in this appendix doesn't address that, but yet in your oral presentation you were talking about moving and doing sampling using the FIS to actually do that. So why wasn't your oral presentation material and the planning on where you were going with this additional spatial temporal analysis, why wasn't in this appendix?
Yeah, you would have to look at the section 6.5, which is where all the details of the next 5-year research plan are outlined. And in fact, there's a specific mention of that particular spatial and temporal analysis. If I can draw your attention to page 23, that would be within section 6.5.2 under reproduction. One of the bullet points, in fact, it's the last before, the bullet point before the last one, specifically states, improve our understanding of potential temporal and spatial changes in maturity schedules and spawning patterns in female Pacific halibut and possible environmental influences. So that is contemplated in the next 5-year research plan.
Well taken. I did not see that bullet, or I didn't appreciate it. Thank you.
So in terms of that appendix, then I guess we're looking for an indication as well. If there's anything else that you would see as being valuable to include in Appendix 2 as a summary of what was done in the previous 5-year plan, or the current 5-year plan, rather.
Yeah, the one thing that strikes me from Appendix 2, and this is a nice summary, by the way. I like how concise it is and organized. The one bullet I was expecting but wasn't here was the integration bullet. For example, I guess picking any of these. So hit bullet 2. Well, under reproduction, bullet 2. I'll hit which one this is. Oh, links to 5-year research plan monitoring. In any case, there's main results, and then there's publications, and there's link to the research plan. But I would have assumed, like under main results, the next bullet would be implications for, or integration implications for stock assessment and MSE, just to give us an idea of, as of right now, like where do these results stand, in terms of when or if they're going to be integrated into those processes.
That makes sense.
Yes, thank you, Sean. Yeah, we appreciate that comment.
And I guess that you could do similar, I guess in the 5-year research plan, you could propose a way to integrate these, but timeline or something.
And again, I was looking in these links to the 5-year research plan for what you had pointed out to me, Joseph. Recognizing that that the data were collected in most of these focal areas, in a single place at a single time, relative to the degree of environmental variability. One of the links would be to expand range wide, to try to develop more mechanistic understanding of what we're seeing, and then as Sean says, how does this information inform the stock assessment and MSE?
Yeah, thank you, Kim. That's a very good point.
Could I just
The other thing
I guess I had some questions of wording to some of these links. I didn't quite understand what you were trying to get across, but maybe that minutial detail isn't really necessary.
We
The other thing I was going to mention, and I don't, this is in terms of the plan overall, uh, is a 2-page executive summary.
Yeah.
I don't see a section for that, but I think that would definitely help.
Sure. We do have all morning to go through any additional detail, and it probably would help us if you do have some, even though you might think it would be small detail, just to highlight for a couple of sections, and then we can talk offline for other sections if there is additional similar detail. So, Kim, if you'd like to just quickly address what you were thinking about, I think that'll help us in terms of the links to the 5-year plan.
Sure. So under migration and distribution, page 27, links to 5-year research plan. I wonder if you could maybe reword this, because I really didn't understand it. Evaluate the level of genetic diversity among juvenile Pacific halibut in the Gulf of Alaska and the Bering Sea due to admixture. So I didn't understand among and the statement due to admixture. Could you please explain that?
Yeah, maybe the wording needs to be worked on a little bit. I think we all understand what we're trying to say here, but again, I think the wording could be improved. What we're trying to determine here is whether through genomic analysis we can identify that there are differences between juveniles collected in the Bering Sea versus juveniles collected in the Gulf of Alaska. Because of the implications of previous work that suggests that the spawning contributions to the Bering Sea are more varied than those in the Gulf of Alaska. And that I'm referring specifically to the work that we published earlier this year, Sadorus et al., that through larval connectivity models, it was estimated that juvenile Pacific halibut in the Bering Sea could be derived from spawning grounds both in the Bering Sea as well as in the Gulf of Alaska. Whereas the Gulf of Alaska juveniles were mostly derived from spawning populations within the Gulf of Alaska. So that's really what's behind this first.
So you're basically saying that admixed individuals should have higher levels of genetic diversity, higher heterozygosity, for instance, than individuals that were produced from spawning among individuals from the same breeding ground?
I suspect that would be one hypothesis, yes.
Okay.
So, uh, so I'm thinking about your measures of success, and one of the things that comes to mind is and I don't really see it in here, but this is almost like an assessment, right? Which is like, what is the current state of of one of the main core areas? What are the key uncertainties that are there, and what progress is going to be made with respect to those. So you need to know where you are right now, make a clear statement of where you're at, to judge whether you've been successful in moving that forward. I think what we're seeing here, especially, you know, from the Appendix 2 we just looked at, for example, we're getting a pretty good idea of the state of the biological and ecosystem research program. That seems to be the most extensively done here. So I'm looking at the other programs in terms of stock assessment and MSE, where that is. If there is a summary somewhere of where it's actually at, what this looks like so far is a description of what MSE is, and not necessarily where your MSE is right now.
Yeah, so just wait while Alan jumps online. But the intention there is, as I said, we have the 5-year biological and ecosystem science research plan, which was a lot more specified and has been targeted with Appendix 2. The other core areas are really about, and I'm trying to find it on the webpage here, sorry, in the document itself, is the links to the webpage, where those updates are, where the status is, and the like. And so just skipping around, trying to find on page 18 for the management strategy evaluation, for example, is sort of that overview of the work that's going to be undertaken. But if we skip back, and forgive me while I scroll here, skip back to those sections, you will actually see the link to the web page, and let's see if this opens. It may not.
Yeah, this is Alan.
Yeah, go on, Alan.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I think the key here was not to bloat the document too much with a lot of details about these different things, but give the ability to find out more information, at least here in section 5, was that really brief background of where things are at. But if you feel that this document would benefit from more description of where things are at, you know, we can easily add to it. And then in section 6, each of these core areas is again repeated, except in section 6 are the more of the integration of this research with that core topic area. So what types of research will what are the priorities of research, and how will that benefit each of these core areas? So we have stock assessment, management strategy evaluation, and economics. And so yeah, as Dave's showing on the screen here is the link to somebody finding out more information about that. But if you do have specific suggestions, and maybe a short section of, you know, recent successes in each of these core areas, that might be useful as well.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's great that you're linking, that you're not trying to bloat this section and that you're linking to the website. But 5 years from now, you know, the website's going to be full of stuff, possibly. And I think maybe, I don't know, it would be nice to have a kind of a succinct kind of snapshot in here. And it may be that you don't need as much detail in what MSE actually is, but because that's something that you could put as a document on the web. You know, a paragraph or two describing what it is and what's been going on. But yeah, it would be nice to see in here a snapshot of where it's at.
Yeah, and it gives that sort of base of why some of this stuff would benefit the MSE. So I see a benefit to that, a little bit of where we're at, and then these things would improve where we're currently at. So I think that's a good suggestion.
Assuming that would sort of be replicated throughout all of the various sections, but you can take note of that as well to try and come up with something similar for each section.
Alan? I don't know, you had that extra meeting after the last SRB and we discussed about something about the development of the MSE for actually, you know, the other way around. At the moment, you're talking how you're going to use the MSE or the information from the other programs in the MSE. I still think there is value in developing the MSE to provide information or prioritization for the other programs, but I don't know whether that was approved by the Commission. You were going to have some discussions.
Secretariat, you know, really does believe in that process, and I've already begun some simulations looking at maturity and the effects of maturity. And we did not have a lot of that discussion with the Commission specifically. There's so much focus on, you know, the 2-year program of work leading up to 2023. But yeah, that is something that I will make sure to bring up to the Commission, to at least communicate with them that the MSE does have a lot of uses outside of just trying to find a management procedure for 2023. So thanks for the reminder. I personally so. At the research and how it's used for developing the MSE, but then we have to turn that table and say eventually this MSE will begin defining some of the research, and so that I think in the integration part of things that would be useful. I will try to find an appropriate place to put that in this document.
So I guess
Maybe then. Go on, you're right.
you know, looking at the first 5-year plan was entitled IPHC 5-year Biological and Ecosystem Science Research Plan 2017-2001. So this was explicitly a 5-year plan for one of the groups of the IPHC, and that was fairly clear. This is IPHC 5-year program of integrated science and research, and it appears that the emphasis of this, and this is something that the SRB has repeatedly called upon the Secretariat to embrace, is, you know, how to integrate the research with, you know, with the assessment and management. And perhaps that would be useful to capture on page 1 of the purpose of this, right? So I guess when I was looking at it, I said there was the first 5-year plan, and that was biology, and biology is certainly highlighted in here, and there's asymmetry of material on the biological and ecosystem services group relative to the others, but there's all this other material that's subsumed in here, and there are areas where sort of the synthesis is emphasized, and then it goes back to the individual areas and that sort of thing. So to me, it was kind of confusing because it didn't really. I don't know. I had a hard time seeing the overarching content and what was trying to be conveyed here. I don't know if I'm being very clear, but and perhaps basically saying, moving on to this new 5-year plan, you know, the purpose is, you know, emphasizing the integration of the constituent parts would be a better statement of purpose, so people would have an idea moving forward, you know, sort of what the you know, what the theme is. I'm not sure that the purpose as written really states that.
Thanks, Kim. Yeah, you're exactly right, and that is the impetus for developing the plan in the current style. Is exactly that, rather than having the biological and ecosystem science branch research plan, for want of a better description, taking on board the various um, recommendations and requests from the SRB over the last number of years to fully integrate across all of our research science and research avenues. That is the purpose of this new plan. So I think you're right. I think if we can couch a couple of additional paragraphs at the start that really highlight that transformation over the 5 years. So even with the previous plan, where the SRB has been requesting and recommending that we link and integrate better for the stock assessment and the management strategy evaluation components, how we're aiming to do that, and as you said, what's the core purpose and need for this current plan. So yes, we'll try and address that and draft up some additional supporting paragraphs for the start of the document. Thanks.
Yeah, and if I may, I think figures
So
four
looking at,
from this report actually really convey
go ahead.
integration, and I think we probably could expand a little more detail with another summary graph showing the interaction, at least between biological research, stock assessment, and MSC, which is really um, probably the core of the document.
So looking at the planned activities, section 6, it starts with stock assessment, and it looks like that section looks pretty sparse compared to, in terms of stock assessment research. I know over the, there have been issues that have been brought up in terms of stock assessment research over the past SRB meetings. So one of the things the plan is for 2022 to 26. You get a full assessment coming up in 22. So, in terms of the assessment, I don't know what research is going to be done, and if it's just going to be updating from year to year. I guess I'm asking, like, is there more to it than this? And we had talked about, I know in the past, looking at different likelihood formulations, looking at model weighting and stuff, which I assume is going to happen, some of it in 2022 as part of the full assessment. Is there going to be 4 years of assessment research, or is it going to be something where the full assessment, that's it, right? The research is integrated in setting up the new full assessment, and then there's no research in the meantime. So could you just clarify some of that?
Yeah, I can. Thanks, Sean, for the question. So, I started out, I guess maybe 3 years ago. I used to have about a 50-point bulleted list in the assessment of assessment-related topics for exploration that were largely not integrated with the research program because they were technical. They were essentially endemic to the assessment and didn't have a lot of transfer back and forth from the research plan. And the guidance, what you're seeing here is in response to the guidance that we've got from the SRB to streamline that down to the top 3 and to identify where those things link to the biological research program. I could certainly add a 4th category. Right now we have data collection and processing, we have biological inputs, and we have fishery yield. I could certainly add a 4th category, which would be, I would call it something like technical development in the stock assessment. And as you note, I have a lot of research topics that we've been working on in the update years and would also be included in full years. The progress on those doesn't really depend on whether it's an update or a full year. The only thing that depends on is whether they get actually integrated into the tactical model in a particular year. So we're constantly working on a variety of those topics. And your point is well taken. I do feel like some of that the documentation of the technical goals for the stock assessment has been reduced as we have made the focus on the top 3 and on how these integrate with the research program. So if you guys think that that would be appropriate to reintegrate those into those technical goals into this research, this 5-year research plan, that's certainly something I could do. I still maintain all those lists of things. We just it didn't seem like it was fitting in quite as well with the vision that you guys had been providing for this document and the real focus on integration with research.
Should those go in the annex in the same way that Josep has an annex? Hello?
Sorry. Yes. Sorry, Sven. Do you mean summarizing the previous 5 years developments, or do you mean an appendix with forward-looking research or technical development?
Well, I'm kind of, well, I mean, a lot of those things you have looked at, you've done some analysis, so they could be either backwards or forwards in the sense that you've done some looking at them already, and you could argue that they would, they need to be, well, decide that some of those need to be further looked into.
So I guess I've been looking at that as we go along, we're documenting all of those investigations through the various working papers, and anything that makes the grade, essentially makes the cut at the end of that evaluation, gets added to the annual assessment, which then gets described in the annual assessment document, and therefore sort of incorporated in the canon of work for that particular year. Certainly the full assessment.
But for example, the different likelihoods, those haven't been implemented yet, but those are things that you have looked at or had a preliminary glance at to see what might work and what might not work. And based on that, you want to decide that you want to do some future research. I think possibly you could just have a general point about technical elements that you're going to look at in this section, and then refer to the appendix where you list some of the things you have looked at and decide you need to look at further.
Yeah, I like the idea of adding a fourth category and capturing some of that material. It's been one of the things that I've been a little concerned with as the way this has evolved, is that the research priority list in the assessment used to focus 100%, almost 100% on technical development. And essentially in response to the SRB's recommendations, we've shifted that to focus on the integrated pieces with research rather than the technical aspects. So I can certainly add that and still have a wide range of topics, both previously investigated and yet to be investigated.
Yeah, and I don't know whether you want a separate point in the research or whether you can add it to the technical stuff, but the review, Dave Stokes' review on the assemblage and what should be done with developing that assemblage, I think that's an important point that might actually want to consider, you know, lift it up to the same level as these ones in the integration, and then have the smaller technical stuff in a separate one. It would be my suggestion, just to balance things out a little. Otherwise, it looks like Ian doesn't do a lot.
Thanks for that. You'll recall in the 2019 stock assessment, and perhaps that's where this has become less apparent, is that it hasn't been since the full document in 2019 that I provided the long list of research, of technical research points to include ensemble weighting and component models and that sort of thing. that level of detail is really not appropriate for the annual assessment documents. But it is very appropriate for the full documents that we do every 3 years. And so perhaps it would be enough to bring a fourth category in here, highlight a couple of the most critical technical aspects, and also provide a link back to that last full stock assessment that included the laundry list of technical developments that we wished we could do. One of Kevin's comments at the time was, it's not all that helpful to have a 50-point list of things you wish you could do that you actually never intend to do. It's much better to have a list of 5 things that you wish you could do that you might actually tackle in the near future. So I don't know if he actually wrote that, but that was the sentiment of his comment. So we've been trying to go down that route. But I definitely like the idea of having a technical development category here, along with the 3 that you see in this section already. Yep, thanks.
And I think that goes back to my original like basis for this that triggered my thinking on this, was that, you know, in terms of measures of success, you want stuff in here that says where you're at. So when you can judge success of the program over time. But yeah, I think it'd be straightforward to, you know, reduce a 50 bullet list. You know, you can certainly put categories in here, you know, that'll be difficult. But I think the thing is, and maybe I don't remember the specific text in the stock assessment section, but, you know, this should continue to emphasize that, you know, the MSE is aiming to identify a procedure for setting quotas, setting annual TACs, but the stock assessment is going to continue forever to be the way you assess the status of the stock, for whatever purposes. You know, there's lots of reasons for doing that, and for keeping, you know, the MSE operating models on the rails, so to speak, you know, with the best assessment. So there's absolutely important research to be done with respect to this particular assessment. So I would be curious to see that, what your 5 topics are going to be.
Yeah, thanks. We had the larger assessment document that's on the website through that link at the top has a discussion of major sources of uncertainty, you know, including the normal cast of characters, natural mortality and steepness, and, you know, all the things that we usually talk about in a technical review of a stock assessment. We've erred a little too much on the light side here, but we tried to keep this document largely free of that level of detail with regard to the stock assessment. But I think it's a great suggestion to add that back in as a 4th category, keeping it maybe a little light in the 5-year plan, but providing a little bit more background on what's been done and what we plan to do. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
I had a question or comment on your figure 4 on page 7. Again, going back to the emphasis of this document on the need and the fact that the Secretariat is embracing this concept of integration, I think, well, I certainly appreciate it, and I'm sure the rest of the SRB did as well, the attempt to provide a conceptual organization chart in figure 4 that emphasizes the linkages between programmatic components and outcomes. So the development of focal area objectives, I think, was really useful. However, the detail of how this figure was constructed are really, really puzzling in some cases, and there wasn't really, other than a sentence or two under core areas background, where figure 4 was first cited. So for instance, there are different colors. Some of the blocks have the same color, some have different colors. Some are rounded edge rectangles, some are ovals. You have arrows, some of which are bold, some of which are stippled, some of which are bidirectional, some of which are unidirectional, and it's really, really confusing. And if this is really going to be, you know, a visualization of, you know, the components and outcomes, then you really need to explain this a little bit better, and it's really quite confusing the way it's constructed.
Yeah, if I could just add to that.
Totally agree with that.
Yes, certainly, I think we'd agree. It's really a representation at the moment of how we've been trying to piece things together. And as you've seen over the last couple of years, trying to link the various elements, trying to organize them into a sensible depiction, so to speak, of how we're integrating things is what's represented here. And so, yes, I think you're completely right. We do need to have a bit of a look at this. Once we flesh out the rest of the document, I think it'll make it a lot clearer about how we can also represent that integration visually. And so this is sort of just a starting point, but no, very well taken, the various points you just made about making this a little bit clearer and also explaining what each of the elements means. So no, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, why are arrows bidirectional? What does that mean compared to an arrow that is unidirectional? I mean, are you looking at differences in relative appointments of linkages that are solid versus stippled versus, you know, really, really bolded or wide? You know, why are they different colors? Why do you have a green arrow going from a green to a blue box? All this stuff, I mean, it's really, really confusing.
Point well taken.
Surprised here that none of these seem to relate to sort of predictive ability to guide management. And I understand that management performance per se is not really the something that the research program is on the hook for, but something in here about, you know, whether or not the guidance that the research program is providing to the commission actually in retrospect turns out to have been accurate. I think that's really fundamental for you know, the role of the secretariat in the whole management system. So some sort of, you know, retrospective look at how good the management advice was seems like it could be a useful addition in terms of the performance criteria.
Yeah, I'd agree. And also it's one of those very double-edged things about to and make a retrospective comment on the quality of the management decisions from the commission. But point well taken about how it's related and how it's based on the advice that we're providing from a scientific perspective. So, no, yeah, we can certainly come up with something there to incorporate.
Yeah, good. And to be clear, it's not a retrospective analysis of the quality of the management decisions, but the quality of the advice. You know, whether the advice turned out to be accurate or not, with the understanding, of course, that this is stock assessment. You know, which is sort of somewhere above or below fortune telling. But you know, this kind of activity, I think, is really useful for understanding, for managers to understand what kind of buffers for uncertainty they might need to be applying in the future. The best way to figure that out is to look in the past and say, well, how far off were we in the past?
Yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, there's a whole field of what's called decision quality research, and there there are ways to judge decision quality that don't depend on outcomes. And that's one of the things that you actually want to avoid is judging the quality of a decision based on its outcome, especially when those are uncertain at the time. So, but there is a whole field of decision quality research that you could use. And that's, I mean, I think that's an important point. That is, and so I agree with Olav on that, that there is a missing element here as to research on decision quality. So you might look into those methods and see whether some of that can be integrated here. No. Well, there are, I mean, there are elements that that define decision quality, and that you could certainly go back and look in the past and say, well, how have decisions been made? Have they considered uncertainty? Have they had clear objectives? Have they blah blah blah? I mean, there are ways. That's essentially what. I mean, that's what MSE is about. It's about creating quality decisions, and so hopefully, in the future, 5 years from now, maybe you could say, our decision quality has gone up because instead of using stock assessments that are not simulation tested and setting quotas that have not been established to be robust, we now are doing that. That would be definitions of decision quality. I could provide some links if you want to some resources for that.
I mean, I think we're getting the sense that there's a lot of different ways to go about this, but some sort of measure of success that relates to the quality of advice provided and perhaps the quality of decisions, although maybe that's getting more into the commission's purview than the secretariat. That will be useful, and that it's probably not something we can come up with specifically right here.
I think that's probably something for the commission to decide, really. I mean, you could decide on, you could report here on the perception of the science and research program, how good their advice is. It would be up to the commission to decide whether they want their decisions to be evaluated for quality. Because it's really, decisions are made by them, whereas advice is what the secretariat's producing. So
one very basic and certainly incomplete measure is looking at stock assessment consistency. So the predictions of biomass and harvest rate for the following year from the past assessment compared to predictions for the same year for the most recent assessment. That's certainly not the only kind of uncertainty that we care about, but if that uncertainty is high, that's sort of like the precision of the instrument. If that precision is poor, well then the accuracy can't be any greater than that.
So we do provide every year in the stock assessment document, we provide a retrospective analysis across recent assessments. So all of the assessments since 2012 are plotted together to see how they have changed over time. So that is provided on an annual basis and presented to the commission. I'll sort of pose a counterpoint though. If we are successful in a great biological research program and we achieve updates to fundamental basic understanding, I think we should expect that our stock assessments are going to change. And so by definition, the better we do, the more likely we are to change our perception of the stock status, unless we just confirm that everything we've been assuming over time is correct. So I think I'm finding this a little hard to follow, how you gauge a research program's success based on stability in decision-making input, because I think by definition it could just as easily go the other way.
That's an excellent point, and certainly stability can very well be perhaps even most commonly a sign that you just never revisit your assumptions. Yeah, and perhaps that's not really appropriate as a measure of success, but it's incredibly important for managers in terms of understanding what kind of buffers they might need to use for uncertainty. How likely are we to look back in the future and end up thinking that we were 10% off versus 50% versus 150% off of what we have, what our current understanding is?
Definitely, and that type of analysis is described annually as part of the presentation of the stock assessment. We look explicitly at how things have changed in recent history, whether we're tending to trend down or upward, and although things have been largely stable in this period, historically the Commission has had stock assessments with breathtaking retrospective patterns, and so this current time period we're in is actually one of the least interesting in terms of rapid updating of our understanding of population dynamics, but we've been there in the past for sure.
Yeah. I guess I'll turn it back to you then, Ian. What would be, do you have any thoughts about what might be a good measure of success in terms of the quality of the management advice that's being provided?
Well, it strikes me that one basic...
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think one basic question is not so much about the decision that was made, but did the decision makers feel that they had the information they wanted at the time? So, for example, we've been asked to do things like, calculate the impact of non-directed discards of small fish in one area on yield in another area. And so we've provided we've provided working papers to answer questions. We've been asked to provide an analysis of the effect of changing size limits on the yield available to the stock. And at the end of 5 years, if the Commission has asked those questions and they've received information that could inform their decisions, then I look at the scientific program as having been successful. Whether they act on those decisions or not, they had the information at their fingertips to make an informed decision at the time. We produced the products that then they could use to make a decision, regardless of what that decision was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so something like responsiveness to the Commission's information needs, evolving information needs.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and I think their ability to process that information. So there could be some kind of, like you said earlier in your presentation, that people, or I think it was one of the observers mentioned that science communication is something that they would like to see more of, and that could be kind of what you're talking about here is measures of success related to science communication. And so you need some kind of mechanism, some kind of feedback, as to how they're interpreting that information.
I think size limit.
I was on a fascinating master's examining committee earlier, just the last month, where it was the student was doing surveys of backcountry recreationists presented with avalanche risk information, and how they process and interpret that information, and how they judge their exposure, which I thought was a very good choice of metric, because exposure can be calculated pretty readily from a map, and everybody can kind of agree on what the correct exposure determination should be. And it was pretty fascinating that a lot of people, when presented with all this graphical information, just totally blew it and didn't get it right. So I thought it would be fascinating to look at something like that, you know, to see if you present a certain amount of information, knowing what the answer is, how people would interpret it. But it's tough to get feedback on, you know, how effective communication is. People might think that they're, oh yeah, this is presented great, I understood it, when in fact you don't actually know that they understood it. So.
I guess related to that, what are the existing pathways by which the Secretariat gets feedback from the Commission on the quality of or quantity and type of their scientific advice? Are there any formal mechanisms?
Sorry, I missed that.
How we get feedback? Yeah, we they don't fire us.
That's a low information content mechanism.
I think our advisory bodies provide most of the feedback, at least in the MSE. Get a lot of feedback from stakeholders through the MSAB process. We get a lot of feedback from the SRB. In the work meeting, the private meeting we have with commissioners, I definitely benefit from that meeting because it's a little bit more informal conversation with them.
But I think
Yeah,
Anne-Marie
it
pointed
really
out
comes
that
down-
the MSAB hasn't met since, like, what was it, September 2020 or something?
Correct, and we're currently scheduling an informational session for this year.
Okay.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that as well, and that sort of comes down to part of that communication point and motivation from the Commission. So whereas in that particular example, the information was presented, the Commission was in a position to make a decision. However, there was simply a policy difference, a conceptual difference between the contracting parties. And as a function of that, the MSAB process was halted directly by the commissioners, who had indicated they wanted to liaise as the two contracting parties to set direction for the Secretariat and by default the MSAB. And so that's one of those instances where all of the information is provided. The Commission is in a position to make a decision. It decides not to make a decision for whatever reason, and then halts the process, the science process, with communication with stakeholders. And so we have reinitiated that, and we'll be reinitiating it. I think November is going to be the next informal meeting of the MSAB. So that's one of those scenarios where the Commission is aware that it has the information it needs to make an informed decision, but decides very specifically not to, and to engage in non-scientific, necessarily, discussions before moving forward.
Thanks for describing that. That's really interesting, and I think it provides useful background to me, at least on sort of the role of the science advice into that decision-making process.
So where to from here, Chair? We could add more information on how we're trying to integrate each of the sections, or I guess we could just keep going with the more generic discussion about other elements that you'd like us to see added to the plan.
Well, I'm curious about the integrating the various sections.
So that's obviously going to be one of the hardest components to do, and the best way that we've come up to do with that is through sort of a tactical activity matrix that's going to be based on a similar format as what Giuseppe had previously put together for just the research biological and ecosystem science research program. But to do that, we're trying to make sure we have all of the key pieces laid out first before we go in and really try and put that matrix together. Otherwise, it's just going to be a rather painful iterative process. It'll be that anyway, but we wanted to get all the pieces in place first before we really try and put it together. One of the questions I guess I did have for you, noting the initial comment about the monitoring section, do you agree with what we're sort of proposing as having the monitoring, the core monitoring programs incorporated in the plan, but as a very distinct or separate section? And so you'll see that in, I'm trying to remember what section it is at the moment, 5.4 and then 6.4. And 6.4 is very much a to be concluded. And there were discussions or comments last SRB meeting that you would like to include a lot of the elements around what sort of quality control and sampling rate estimation procedures we go through. So I guess we could get some feedback on that. That'd be useful as well.
Section that says how you intend to go about optimizing or the resources that you have to assist the other programs, something along those lines, as well as the feedback from those programs, particularly the stock assessments, as to, you know, how much data you need, you know, to change the monitoring. I mean, that's the research element that relates to monitoring, sample sizes and things like that.
Makes sense. Okay, thanks. Ian's just pointed out as well, it would be worthwhile us, again, linking back to some of the key directions and recommendations we received from the second performance review. That's something we haven't actually done as yet, but that would make a lot of sense as well, particularly in the opening sections, and then our measures of success in implementing those recommendations from the performance review itself. And I think there was quite a number of specifically targeted to our overall science programs and the quality and provision of scientific advice that we provide to the Commission.
Okay, so this has been confusing me for quite a while now. I'm just going to say it. The integrated science and research. It seems like I'm not sure. Like it seems like 1 minute we're talking about specifically the biological and ecosystem research program, and at other times we're talking about all the science and research that's done.
Yeah, and I think part of that is,
For example, here,
sorry, go on.
well, here in 4.4, the first bullet of the integrated science and research program is to establish world-leading programs in fisheries research, particularly genomics and genetics. That seems like an odd choice for the first bullet. I would have thought the first bullet would be, you know, to establish world-leading programs in you know, science advice for Pacific halibut or something, you know, related to the core purpose of the Commission.
Yeah, just to chime in there, and I think part of this,
If it was, you know, the whole.
yeah, no, I'd agree with you entirely, and part of that is because we started developing this document with the previous 5-year plan, biological and ecosystem science research document as the basis. And so a lot of these, as you say, have come out of that plan and been refined. However, we haven't yet really gone back looking at the various other sections, how they've been developed and how we're integrating them, and then come back and update it this particular section, but also in other sections as well. So you're entirely right, and the reason for that is that we used the previous plan as the basis to start with, and we just haven't come back yet and really reviewed it all, noting all of the other areas and priorities. So yes, completely correct there, and something we'll need to address.
And genetics are great tools and open up lots of avenues of research, but I'd say leading with the tools as opposed to the goals of the biology program, integration with other sections is probably not the way to go. I think the goal is not to become one of the best in the world at fisheries genomics and genetics. I think the goal is to provide biological understanding to the stock assessment and MSE process, as well as directly informing the commission about aspects of biology that are relevant to their decision making. So sometimes that will be done through genomics and genetics, but often there are lots of other tools that would be more appropriate.
Yeah, it could be something like world-leading fisheries research in support of fisheries management, or in support. So your fisheries research could be world-leading and then specifically applied to in support of management of Pacific halibut. I think that would be, I think that would be a pretty good, to me anyway, it would say pretty clearly to me what it is you're aiming to do.
Makes sense.
But I also recognize that, there are a number of things, methodology, analytical approaches that the IPHC staff that have done that are groundbreaking, right? I mean, it's just focusing on halibut, but it's groundbreaking methodological research that could be applied in a lot of different areas, and that's really true. It doesn't have to be, just associated with improving the understanding of halibut. That's true, but I would consider just changing the entire, what you're calling this document. I mean, integrated science and research isn't the majority of research in the science area. So why the science and research? To follow what Sean said, I don't get the title at all. The integrated part, yes.
Integrated research, I think, would be good. And I think you could put in sub bullets too. I think getting to Kim's point, like to emphasize that yes, in some areas, in terms of world leading fisheries research, you could get specific, like whether it's a goal of the overall research program, that's one thing, but it should be noted somewhere that in pursuit of this overarching objective, you're also developing, for example, specific world-leading research in genomics and genetics, fisheries genomics and genetics, and generally. And that this. a great point. Or among the world leading, if you really want to position yourself. But I agree that who's leading and who's not, I don't think is the point.
Even innovative is not necessarily the point. I mean, if it's very standard derivative kind of methods, but it's answering an important question for stock assessment and the management strategy evaluation, I think that's incredibly useful. It's, I mean, at this point, most of the things,
High impact.
high impact. There we go. Yep.
Although you could argue then it's not research, then it's just application.
It's still research. It's applied research. It's just that the methods aren't necessarily innovative. They're just, I mean, cutting up lots of fish to weigh the gonads and look at the eggs. Some aspects of that are not terribly innovative, but it's incredibly important for the stock assessment, right? I mean, I think that's the sort of thing that's not innovative. It's not world leading, but it's important in terms of the role of the biology program for the broader enterprise.
And you would certainly, I mean, you could go back to our current SRB report and find comments we've made like this doesn't have any impact. So I think, in terms of academic research, impact isn't important, but this is like the only reason this commission exists is to manage Pacific halibut. The fisheries anyway, but yeah. So related to that, another is the first sentence of the background. I don't know if you want to scroll up to it, but
Yeah, let's grab that.
so yeah, I mean, I assume this is going to, you might want to think about, if you're thinking about revising the, what the plan is, the title of it, thinking about the broader goals and kind of getting some distance from the last plan, which I assume the 2021 plan was carried forward from the 2015 plan, which was carried forward from the, and so on. So if this is the time where you kind of want to think about that, like this background, IPHC has a longstanding history of collecting data. I think this would be a good place to say what,
I think it's referring to page 1.
what the purpose of the IPHC is, rather than of the specifics that it collects data and does research.
Sean, you are looking at page 1, right?
Introduction? Or, sorry, you're actually,
I'm looking
you mean on the paper?
No, I'm looking up more. You're looking at page 4. At least that's the one I have.
And where are you looking?
Anyway, that's just a, if you're going to be working on doing revisions and continuing to develop this, I would just suggest that.
Sorry, I'm going to have to ask you to repeat it. I missed what section exactly you were talking about. What?
Can you scroll up to page 1?
Oh, and the cover of the... okay,
yeah.
The cover, yeah.
Yeah, there you go, background.
Now I understand.
Yeah. So this is essentially the first sentence people read.
Well, this is just for the cover paper for the SRB.
So,
But yes, this could also be lifted into the 5-year plan itself.
oh,
This is just the cover paper. Sorry.
sorry. So is everything we're saying here going to be summarized in bullets and recommendations, or
Well, I hope not everything, otherwise the report's not going to be clear
general
today.
conversation?
But if you're able to, for the report, the SRB report, include some sort of general comments about the progress that's being made, and then highlighting those core areas. And if you'd like to put a set of dot points in, that would also be particularly useful. But all of us have been busily taking notes on the various suggestions, recommendations, and requests, and our intention is to implement almost all of them, and those that we're unsure about will come back to you just informally through email correspondence. But we've really appreciated the various suggestions for improvement and modification, and it's our intention to implement those. So, as I said, we've been busy taking notes, and I think everybody's clear on how we're going to improve the document itself.
And these will mostly be requests or recommendations, do you think?
Yeah, because
I would prefer to put them as requests.
Yeah, that's the most sensible thing, because our intention is to implement them immediately. So literally, come next week, we're going to be working on a combined version of this document and implementing them. So there's really no point to send it to the interim meeting, because by the interim meeting it will already have been done. So yeah, just requests for improvement would be really would be my sensible way to go.
Okay.
Yeah, so last week at the work meeting, the commissioners' work meeting, they received essentially the exact same document as you've reviewed at this point as well. Oh, no. Okay, so what I could ask is all SRB members as well, if you do have additional comments or specific things that you think of after this meeting, that you just send them straight through. It's our intention, as I said, we're going to try and update this over the next couple of weeks, and we'll probably just send it back to you informally to see where we're at and see if there's any other redirection that you might like to provide. And then we'll just move forward with trying to finalize it as much as possible, noting that it's going to be a living document. It's not something that we're just going to finalize, put in place for the next 5 years. The intention is to present it to the commission, and then again at the SRB next year as well. If you review that next version and say, well, no, you really want to redirect for the next 4 years, that's something that we can just republish it as a new revision and new direction based on the any new guidance that the commission may provide in particular. So I guess that's sort of just a general comment.
Great. Okay. Well, it's 11:30. Does anyone want to add anything? I think there's a lot to do, so I think that's good. And what we could do is essentially we have an hour until lunch, and what we could do is start our drafting session now, so that after lunch we could possibly have a draft to go over.
That'd be fantastic. Yeah, so if you're able to spend that next hour, send it back to me. We can incorporate it into a final version, send it back to all of you, and then at 1:30 reconvene to go through a final review of the meeting report. That'd be great.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Very much. Secretariat, if you want to move the SRB through.
Thank you very much, and we'll be
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, Sean, if the secretary just wants to move the SRB.
planning it, getting back together at 1:30.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. All right.
How's that? Can you all see it now?
Yep, all good. Thank you.
My wish is your command, Sean. Or your wish is my command.
Maybe Sean isn't there yet.
Then he has no wishes to command with.
I have a wish in that case. We go to paragraph 39. There is the reference to paragraph 37, and it should be 38.
Great.
That could actually reference both of those paragraphs if you wanted it to.
Come on,
yes,
Jeannie.
this is the these are the two paragraphs that I think we were going to be sticking together somehow.
Yes. No, we stuck those together.
Oh, it is? Okay. Yeah, okay.
All right, Sean, would you like to lead us off from paragraph 1? Otherwise, I can see we can jump. Oh.
Looks clear here.
I,
It usually happens on Sunday morning. Sean, I just note here that this is recalling two actions that came up during the from requests at SRB 18. We also had that request in SRB 18 for more information about the goals of the economic analysis. Do you think that should be mentioned here as well?
I think you have that one down below. Revisit. So the options here, Chair. Sorry, Chair. So the options here is that you can either move them, these two sub-paragraphs for recalling, into the relevant section, so on the Fishery Independent Setline Survey, and then also in, actually they're both Fishery Independent Setline Survey, and then the economics relevant paragraph down to the economics section, which is where it is at the moment. And so we have a bit of a difference here. You can either recall them all and put them here, or you can split them into the relevant sections in the report, but probably not to do both. let's grab that. Olaf, this is paragraph 59 in the current. So if we copy that and then move it up and then have a discussion around that if we could. So just a few questions around that, and I'm going to pass to Basha just while I quickly try and find the original. So Basha, did you want to have a chat about that one?
Right. So thank you for recalling this. I would like you to consider here as well the difference between the objective of the shorter project as it was developed at the beginning versus our longer term goals that has been described in the 5-year program of integrated research, where the more overarching longer term goals are described, and there you clear how the plan is to integrate the economics with the rest of the IPHC work, and as well this is something that is going to be presented to the Commission for consideration.
We
Yeah,
can't
that's an
change it
important
here.
distinction.
Well, we can't change it here if it's up here, because basically we're just referring to something that's already done and dusted. We would then have to have a different comment in the economics section. But even there, it's not difficult. It's difficult to comment on the long-term goals and objectives. Well, on the long-term research plan, because we don't know what they want out of that research plan. You know, how are they going to use that information? That's why we need their objectives for the economic work in order to say anything.
That's right.
Yeah, I think that's a key thing, Sean. So I've gone and done that in my version. So all I've done is gone and taken that actual paragraph 52 and dropped it here. So it matches the format of those previous two. So in short, all you're doing is you're just recalling these actions or these requests. And then in terms of the comments that Bush has made down in the economic section, we could address that if you'd like to pursue it that way.
That makes sense. I think we phrased it a bit more precisely last time around. So just repeating that here is probably better. So Dave, I can leave this here, and you've fixed this in your version.
Yeah, so that's now a simple cut and paste. It's already done. Yep. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Because this is now up here, should we keep this down at the bottom in the economics section?
When we get there, I think we should have another discussion about it. Yeah, about how to
Okay.
couch it a different way potentially. I think Anne-Marie wants to speak on this, Chair.
Yeah, not quite example text so much as just here are some things. Yeah, so I think two things. One is that the paragraph 10 sort of says that they were items that we were looking for points of clarification. And I think that it's probably less points of clarification that we're looking for from you guys so much as trying to provide some context that might help as you deliberate over the course of the 3 days. So it was more context as opposed to specific questions in terms of the things that I was raising anyways. And then if I was to narrow it down to like a few key things that I was trying to raise, I think one of them would have been around the communication of the management strategy evaluation outputs as well as the process. And then in terms of the new 5-year integrated plan, a way to try to draw linkages between the items in the plan and how it will affect what shows up in front of the commissioners in terms of how does it affect the things that they need to make decisions. I think is something that I was getting from things that they were saying last week. Also in the 5-year integrated plan, I'm getting a feeling that climate change is starting to be rising in the priority list of things that are of interest for the commissioners. And then I think actually this seems to be a bit of a chicken and egg kind of discussion in terms of the economic analysis. Like I'm not getting a clear idea from the commissioners that they are clear on how the economic analysis will be implemented. And so you're asking them for clarification. And so I'm not quite sure how to insert like a little break. But it could be that they're very, very clear. I just don't get the sense that they're very clear about how they are going to, how they're wanting to implement.
I do see 2 points linking the 5-year plan to information provided to commissioners and how economic analysis will be implemented into advice. So those are additional points here. Yeah.
So just seeking confirmation, Chair, are you looking at replacing the current 4 dot points with these new 4 dot points? No, yeah, and I think it. Yeah, and so I think that's the case that they were left over from the previous report, as you pointed out, and we tried to modify them from what we could tell, but we weren't quite sure. So I would suggest then we simply remove those 4 that are currently there and replace with the 4 that Anne-Marie has emailed through to us all, and it's just run through.
Did also mention the update versus full assessment thing.
Sorry, the moving back and forth between the chat and the window here is really slow.
Yes, that was the point. I think our recommendation is that they keep that, but for the reasons Ian also mentioned, it's always a good idea to have a look under the hood and explore new things and go back over old things. Something that won't get done otherwise.
I'm not following. Are you suggesting another bullet point here about the 3-year assessment schedule?
The need for, well, there was a point there about the need for a 3-year full assessment schedule, so it should go here. Whether we address it in the stock assessment section to say we recommend that you keep it, that's the only thing I guess we have to discuss. I mean, I don't think we have to address each of these points separately, right?
Um, so no, I just brought up the 2022 assessment just because that sort of triggered the, oh, we're on a 3-year schedule. Does the 3-year schedule still make oh my gosh, does the 3-year schedule still make sense question? So it wasn't anything specific to the 2022. It was just more of a, oh, while this has come up, does it still make sense? And I
Should we say 3-year full stock assessment schedule?
Yeah.
Because they do a stock assessment every year.
Yes, definitely still like the idea of having a stock assessment. And then the last point I think was around climate change being a high priority.
I'm sorry, Marie, can you suggest some phrasing there that would can be added here?
Yes. Let's see. How would climate change affect halibut biology and assessment as a broad? Am I missing anything if I just say biology and assessment?
There's a question not around how it impacts the management.
Mm. Yes, maybe it would be like what considerations would the commissioners need to take into account? Or the way that we're going, maybe 10 or 20. Yeah.
There won't be
Go with
any
that.
need for an assessment by then.
Looks good. Thank you.
I mean, we have that general request about the 5-year plan, and just add another bullet to say to complete the section on climate change by SRB20. Yeah, I mean, fill it out. Put something in it.
How's that?
By SRB20, I think you need to be specific on that one.
Only on that one? I mean, we've
I
got
guess
a
you
lot
could
of
ask
advice
for
here.
all of them, but I don't know what their schedule is for that 5-year plan, Dave.
Yeah, our current schedule is to have that wrapped up, obviously, by the end of the year so that we can start to move forward with it. But as I said, it's a living document. And so come SRB next year, if we agree that there's something else that needs to be added or modified, we'll do that. And it will just be published as a Rev 1 version of it next year. So there's no concern with taking that approach.
I think that brings us to the set line survey. Yeah.
It's Ray here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Right. If you don't mind, I wouldn't mind uh, discussing 23 and 24 for a little bit. So I appreciate the concerns you had about the simple approach we presented. I mean, the idea was that it would be perhaps because of the limited impact this has. This is having something simple that dealt with it seemed like that was perhaps mm, that okay. Let me rephrase it. That spending a lot of time on this and doing more complicated analyses is maybe of limited value, given that that the low impact of this adjustment, or the low impact of whale depredation in general, or marine mammal depredation in general. So I'm not sure. I mean, I welcome Ian's. I'm getting a lot of feedback from microphones that are turned on as well. I'm not sure about how wise a use of time it would be to do a more detailed analysis by June 2022, given the other things that are intended to be presented at that particular meeting. In particular, Ian might want to comment on request 24, a sensitivity analysis. I think, based from our discussion the other day, that this will have negligible or no discernible impact on the assessment. It's even in area 4A, what it does is it changes, adding that simple adjustment through a covariate improved the precision of the index, but it didn't change the index itself by a meaningful amount. And given that 4A is, I don't remember, between 5 and 10% of the stock or something like that, it's going to have no discernible impact on the stock assessment. It may have some impact. So I don't think that Ian may disagree with me and may really want to do that analysis, but I don't think rerunning the stock assessment without that correction is probably a good use of his time. In terms of the future designs, that might be something more worth looking at, and that's something I probably is worth looking at by June 2022, because I will be reviewing those designs. So if the improvement in precision has some potential implications for the designs that we present in future years, like we may not need as many stations if we include the whale depredation covariate, then that's something that would be straightforward for me to integrate. But if we're getting down to making this a much more complicated modeling approach, I mean, some of these things are worth looking at, but I don't know. You know, it was meant to be a nice little fix that allowed us to include more data, but I'm interested in your views on this. Can I make a suggestion? Can I make a quick suggestion just before? Can I make a quick suggestion? This is something that is perhaps worth watching as the years go by, and perhaps the impact of whales may change, or the other species may change. We may find in the future we're getting more sets affected, and that it has more of a meaningful impact. So maybe this is something that we continue to keep an eye on, and we can look at some of those suggestions that you've made, such as I mean, these are good. These are, I certainly agree, these are worthwhile suggestions you've made. The impact of treatment of associated length compositions, noting that Ian mentioned that he doesn't use the length data from these sets that are ineffective. I think that's where that came from. And the possibility of bias, given that we are estimating a covariate that's at present fixed with time and doesn't change very by year or by other factors. So those are things that are certainly worth closer analysis. It's just maybe all I'm asking is that we don't necessarily have a time frame on that. That is something we continue to monitor, look at closely, and consider those things that you've suggested.
I think that's a sensible suggestion. Supported the monitoring of the situation or something along those lines.
Yeah, or something like, given the low impact of this correction at present, the SRB supports continuing monitoring and evaluation of predation data on the FIS and its potential impact on whatever CP, HUI, and the stochastic. Yes, I would like to see the points that you've made in there, specific points on length distribution and the potential bias. I think those are worthwhile points to make.
Yeah, and I think you still got the limited impact of this correction again in that paragraph that we wrote originally, so you'll have to remove that bit because you already talked about the limited impact. No, you want to keep the associated length distribution bit, don't you?
It was already explained in our discussions, right? Oh, you mean better explained within the model?
Yes. Yes.
Or just for clarification, are you referring to the space-time modeling of the FIS or the stock assessment, which at present doesn't use those data from depredated sets? I see.
Well, it's got to be the latter because the first one doesn't consider it.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough, but I mean, oh, okay.
Just add stock assessment model.
And perhaps just to clarify, it should probably be age compositions rather than length, because that's what I use directly in the assessment.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
In any case, isn't that something that Ian was going to look at as part of his full assessment anyway?
Yeah, thanks, Sven. It is on my short list of things to add under that bullet where you guys left a placeholder.
Okay.
Yeah, Ian, just to point out again that we really appreciated the thorough investigation there and the surplus production analysis. That ended up being more interesting than we even anticipated.
Thanks. Yeah, it actually was an interesting exercise to go through for me as well. It had been a few years since we even talked about surplus production.
Uh, 28, we weren't, sorry, 28, we weren't sure whether that should be reflected in the MSE or if it's enough here just to mention it here.
It won't be forgotten.
Okay.
You read this section too, Alan?
Yes.
Good.
Could I make a quick comment on 29? This is Ian.
Please, yeah.
So I guess I'm sensitive to a couple of pieces of background information with regard to the long-term pattern in surplus production. As I noted during the presentation, during the early 2000s, the stock was coming down from effectively the 100-year high in biomass. And so the biomass, the relative biomass, retrospectively looking back, was between B60 and B40 at that time. So I'm not sure, this is where I felt like surplus production can be a little misleading, because I think virtually any stock assessment would have suggested fishing down the stock at those levels of biomass. In addition, and to make it more complicated, that would be a fairly simple story, but to make it more complicated, the halibut stock assessment also had a pretty horrible retrospective pattern during this time period. And so I guess my suggestion would be this could get confusing in a hurry to people trying to digest this information, but the clearer signal to me was the revealed a short-term pattern of exceeding the surplus over the last few years, which in some regards differs with the current management procedure, which was suggesting an F46 or an F43 is appropriate in the long term. And to me, that's an even stronger take-home message, which is that we now have this situation where we're at a low biomass and our long-term sustainable harvest rate is perhaps, or is almost certainly going to lead to a relatively low biomass and a declining trajectory in the short term. And I think that's what you guys were trying to capture here.
Yeah, we had talked about both of those things, Ian, but I think you're right here to focus on the fact that we are currently exceeding surplus production. That's
think
probably more relevant.
that change as you've made it there will be quite clear.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually
I do want to say,
well, B36 is the proxy for MEY, and we're currently estimated to be at B33%. So the choice to apply an F43 policy at current biomass levels is leading to a further decrease in biomass away from the target. That's where I think that the utility of surplus production is greatest when the stock is at or near that target level, because that's where you might start to see some divergence between the fishing rate and the surplus production and or relative biomass.
is that statement there accurate despite current biomass being below the target biomass?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, good.
If we're on to if we're on to 30, I can provide, I provided you with a fairly long list, and I realize it wasn't in the printed material, so I thought I'd recap a couple of the items that I touched on, and you can decide whether you want to include them here or not. In no particular priority order, we discussed continued exploration of data weighting. We discussed evaluation of how the sex ratio in the commercial fishery is being treated as the data set becomes a little bit longer. For the commercial sex ratios, I may be able to model selectivity a little better. Sorry, Olaf, I'll just let you catch up and I guess more ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe that's enough for the request here, since this is nominally a communication to you.
Thanks. Yeah.
And you understand what these mean?
Definitely. The other two were the use of the PDO and other environmental relationships as covariates with recruitment. And then finally, the estimation of whale depredation mortality for potential inclusion, explicit inclusion in the assessment. And of course, there's a laundry list of other things that I plan to investigate, all the usual actors in stock assessment, steepness and M and the ensemble structure itself. But I'm not sure that we necessarily need to include the entire list here, although I could certainly provide more bullets if you'd like. Might just say other topics as discussed in recent SRB meetings or something, because I have, as we've gone along, we've done analyses on M and steepness and a variety of these sort of standard bad actors for stock assessment parameters.
Well, and to some degree, your time is limited as well. So if these things work out being more complicated than some of the others, you'll have to drop some or delay some anyway. So I think
correct.
It's fine to just say and others mentioned discussed over since the last full stock assessment.
Perfect. Thank you.
would this be a good point as well to address Anne-Marie's question regarding, or the sense of the 3-year full assessment cycle?
Or is that in the MSC? No, but I guess I wasn't clear on whether the concern is, what a 3-year cycle would do to management performance, or
No,
in which
this was
case,
clearly about having a full assessment every 3 years. That's what it was about,
okay.
as opposed to having, a 5-year cycle where you do a full assessment every 5 years and do update assessments in between. It definitely belongs in the stock assessment section.
I would say, the SRB.
Yeah.
Okay, so another paragraph, right? Am I okay?
Sounds good. Thank
Oh,
you.
Anne-Marie.
I think the SRB continues to endorse, doesn't, you have to have a request or noted or some action in there, right? So I think we just continues to recommend the 3-year schedule instead of saying to endorse.
What about that?
No.
Really doesn't recommend, require some action? I thought we had discussed before, recommend, and then think about what we want.
That's a time schedule there.
Can I ask just a quick general question of like what's the intent? Is the intent because it was brought up as an option to change? I don't think it was, but maybe I was out of the room. So you don't really need a recommendation to continue to do something unless it's being suggested to change.
Well, we wanted to address Anne-Marie's comments regarding the need for a 3-year full assessment cycle. And we're not quite sure how to do that in terms of the lingo.
So I guess my point was if we're not actually changing it from what it currently is, it would just be something like the SRB agreed that the assessment should continue on a 3-year cycle or something simple.
It's agreed like what we were looking for, yeah. Oh, mine's gone funny colors now, Olaf. What have you done?
How's that?
Perfect.
I can't see it right now, but I'm sure it's fine.
I don't have a funny color button, I swear.
This is Alan, if I may. It may be useful to say that a full stock assessment, just to avoid confusion with the multi-year stuff that I've been investigating. Thank you. If I may comment on 33, it mentions develop alternative versions of each management procedure that represent implementation bias. However, it's not, in my view of this, it's not the management procedure that contains implementation bias, but it's the framework. And I'm wondering if an alternative text may be alternative implementation or alternative scenarios of implementation bias to investigate management procedures or something like that. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I just don't want to conflate the management procedure with implementation bias.
Yeah. I mean, my thinking with this, Alan, is that, if you presented a management procedure, you would also present how that procedure would perform if there were implementation bias. And so maybe I was thinking of that as sort of a paired version of each management procedure, but I could equally well see it as different scenarios for implementation uncertainty.
Yeah. Thanks, Olaf. I think when I look at this in a month or so again and try to remember, I'll be more familiar with the term scenario, and I think the commission itself has been used to using this as a scenarios as well.
Perfect. Then let's stick with that language.
Okay.
Are we happy to keep with bias there, or do we now want to kind of be consistent and call it implementation uncertainty?
No. Sven, the idea here is that it's not just uncertainty, but bias.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah.
In fact, these were originally highlighted for just that purpose.
Okay.
I'll add
Let's
that
leave
back
them
there.
highlighted.
Yeah, definitely.
Have a question in terms of, is there a time, would it be helpful to put a time frame on that? Because it seemed like the discussion that you were having, it was more about the short-term performance.
Is that good there?
I just saw that 33 doesn't have a time limit on it, which we're supposed to have for recommended.
How's that? Is that reasonable, Alan?
Yes, I think that's great. Putting that in there for implementation very soon. So thank you. Uh, it- yeah, if I may ask the intent of 36, there's the phrase, the management procedure be decided on the basis. And I'm wondering if that if two things can be clarified and maybe linked to earlier paragraphs. One, potentially modifying that text to say something like management procedure to be adopted soon or something like that, and trying to link it to 35. Is that the intent of this paragraph, is to link it to that last words of paragraph 35?
Think
I think that will
immediate
help.
manage.
Right.
Or maybe evaluated.
Yeah, yeah, because I think when the commission reads this, that they know the SRB is suggesting their process be based on the current operating model. So I think this helps what you've written there.
I think we've got three futures here, and I can't understand what this phrase is supposed to mean.
Yeah. Maybe we'll find out in the future.
I love it. It's futuristic.
Well, I think it was important that well, to request from Alan that he tries to separate those processes more clearly. So yes, it is. If he's got to do that anyway, we can delete that here.
And then Sven, I think your suggestion. Go ahead. And yeah, I would agree, and I think that's what Sven was mentioning earlier about linking back to what says paragraph 38, but should now change to 36. So I agree with you, Sean.
Good. That's nice. It's no longer redundant there now.
The future is now bright.
That's short-term thinking.
Bunch of nerds.
This first one needs a little wordsmithing.
think it relates to the same thing.
If I may make a comment, this is Giuseppe. In regards to comment A, I would like to point out that just to clarify that the study that you're referring to was the one that was designed to characterize the seasonal development of reproductive changes in females over an entire annual cycle.
It isn't just that, Giuseppe. It was also the study about the growth markers, and it was another one. So it's a number of them. It's a recurring theme. I think that's why we're trying to bring it up in the general section.
But it specifically states the reproduction focal area. Comment A. I'm just trying to argue that, in fact, that study, compared to other studies that have been done in similar studies in other species, the sample size is actually fairly decent. If you want to know, for instance, what was done with the sablefish, black cod, in a recent study published in 2017, the sample sizes were about 15 females per month, though we actually did 30. So in the literature, from my understanding, it's a decent sample size. It's not a small sample size.
Not when you're trying to describe the reproduction over the entire range, or the maturity over the entire range of the stock. I think that's what
that was not the purpose of the initial study, so.
I'm going to put single year because it was. Yep. Sean, shall we move on?
Quick question about 40C, the last one. Is that actually supposed to be MLE or are we MSC?
Thanks. I'm getting my maximum likelihood estimators confused with my management strategy evaluations.
If I may flag that 41, I think, is repeated down below in 45.
Oh, good. Let's just check that out. Should we delete 41? It seems like makes more sense in 45. Thanks, Alan.
regarding 41, is the idea from the SRB that those opportunistically collected samples are in the FIS? Is there a specification there, or you just want to leave that open?
Yeah, the discussion, Joseph, was that much of the cost of collecting samples has already been spent when you've got a gonad in the hand, or a fish in the hand, and that sort of thinking ahead to future sample collection needs would be beneficial in terms of making the most of that expense that's already been laid out to capture the fish.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Thanks.
So is there more that we can get from those fish once they're caught on the FIS?
In 42, there's a typo there after studies. It should be in one location. Studies in or on.
Thanks, Joseph.
If I may, on 43, in the last sentence, it's however the noting is that the conclusion is that July and August is unacceptable, which may I would suggest which may or may not represent seasonal reproductive timing in other regions. We just don't know.
Yep.
I think the next one should be 46 instead of 47.
Well, here we go. Where are you looking, Kim? Ah, I see. Oh, thanks. Yeah. Great.
In 46B, in 46B, there's a little bit of redundancy there. It's to quantify gene expression levels of genes. I would delete the first gene. I think expression levels of genes that captures the information. On 47, I think that after noted, I think it should be a D. Noted the information on associations.
Yep. age length information, which is available. Yeah. Joseph, maybe we should provide just a little bit of background here on 48, and that's that. I think we were all excited about the gene expression results, and especially the comparison with the wild capture fish. And then we were also, that was sort of the scientist in us, and then we're also trying to figure out, whether this is actually the better approach to characterizing growth variability. And so 48, I think, is really just asking for some reflection on that.
Yeah, and I think that comment is well taken. I understand. I think I understand the meaning of this particular comment. Yeah, I have no objections.
Great.
Yeah, in 51, on the second line, promise should be promising.
Thanks. Oh, no, and the promise preliminary data showed.
And then promise.
Yeah, that's maybe a little confusing.
Then make sure just deleting that.
Is that clear, do you think?
Yes. On 52, I think there's a couple of typos. The second line, it would be regarding additional analysis that attempt. It's not singular.
Yeah.
To characterize.
Who wrote this stuff? Oh, wait, we did.
Yeah, thank you. Well, one brief comment, just so that we know how to address this recommendation specifically for the next meeting. In what format would the SRB require us to present those research areas? If you recall, in SRB 18, we presented a few research topics with the documentation provided. And there was some concern about how that was presented. What's the exact indication as to how we should present this research areas for the SRB to provide input. And how developed? Okay, great. Thanks for the clarification, Ken. Yeah, we'll definitely follow those instructions for the next meeting. Thank you.
The presentation Tim gave on the update and the planning for the histological sampling, was a good example of what we would have liked to have been able to think about and review before. But I mean, that is this types of information we're looking for. What are the sample sizes? Where are the samples coming from? How are you making those decisions? That's what allows us to say, yeah, this has a good chance of working, or this hasn't got a good chance of working. Or why have you considered this? So I think it's that sort of plan that we're looking for.
Thank you. Great, thank you.
If I may comment, maybe I will just recall here the original objectives for the economic analysis, and this was to undertake a broad economic study, including the identification of any knowledge gaps of the Pacific halibut fishery. And I think in these terms, we make quite of a progress. But this differs from the longer term objectives. And perhaps the SRB could acknowledge that the long-term objectives related to the socioeconomic analysis, particularly these, the management relevance, are subject to the discussion related to the discussions at the Commission related to the 5-year plan.
Elijah, I heard you. I'm just trying to figure out what text changes might correspond to that.
If you are willing, or you would like to include that, of course we have that recommendation recalled earlier on, but just perhaps acknowledging that there is work related to look at these long-term objectives that has been undertaken under the 5-year plan, instead of being discussed directly in the current update paper. Yes, that would be section 6.3. Or perhaps you can specify 6.3. If to be exact. — 6.3.2. We could also just point to the more general section 5.3 that has a more general objectives, and when it introduces the economic study. Maybe that would be more suitable. So that would be 5.3. If you go to
Thanks, I've got it.
that.
Yeah, thank you for calling that out, Basha.
In the 58, there is just a missing Q that it should be USA for the guided anglerfish program.
No South African halibut.
Yes, this is definitely something we'll be able to at least, as said here, assess the feasibility.
Great. I'm really looking forward to that.
Change, but the next one doesn't have a date on it. The next request, that one doesn't have a date on it.
May I ask just a clarification on the 59? I would be just interested, is that more of information that could feed this type of understanding? So relevant data for that, or you would be interested in seeing something more like a supply inverse demand kind of analysis of how the prices changes with the changing supply? Some more modeling approach to that, or just and if I might just add, I will just mention that I did have a preliminary look at this topic, and I did estimate the inverse demand for the Pacific hub, just preliminarily. The question here is really to look at what are the potential substitutes for Pacific halibut products. So this is something that requires further investigation. So I definitely can present the initial analysis, but maybe more comprehensive presentation of the inverse demand curves might require some further looks. But that can be definitely discussed, at least the initial steps during the SRB019. To follow on that, this is part of the county level assessment that I already started. So this is something that is definitely on the agenda for me to look at. So I am happy for this to stay and provide you a more detailed picture on the progress there during the next SRB meeting.
Is that better? Yeah, when I look at my meeting controls, it blocks blocks everyone else's view of the document. Yeah, if I look at the chat, for example, or the video, yeah, if I look at the video, it blocks your view. So I can either see the document or see you guys. Occasionally, I like to see your faces. Don't worry, Sven. I've been saving all along here.
So there was just one paragraph at the end that we forgot to add in, and that's just we did it at the start where it was the SRB wanted to thank outgoing board member. So we can add a paragraph in there for you as well.
Well, it's very kind of you.
I sort of sent it through to Sean to read out, but I guess he didn't check his email. So yeah, it would just read something along the lines of the SRB thank outgoing board member Dr. Sven. And again, I'm not going to try and pronounce your name, Sven. For his service.
Sorry, Dave. Can you tell me where this goes?
It'll be the second last paragraph, just before the report adoption.
Uh-huh.
So we will add that in. And so with that, we will finalize over the next hour or two and distribute that and publish it on the website. So no, thank you very much. Very good.
Hang
Well,
on, gang.
I thought some of our discussion.
You put it in the chat, Sean? I don't see it.
Right, it'll be there in the final version.
Oh, God. I've still got to provide stakeholders with an accurate da-da-da.
See it
Not in my chat.
over on the attendee chat on the left.
Dave can paste it in.
There, it's over here.
Okay, I'm going to put a note here, Dave, to paste it in. Is that okay?
That's great. Thank you.
Sven, you have to promise to come by and visit next time you're in Seattle.
Yeah, next time they let me in again in the country, I mean, it'd be nice to be able to go to Seattle again, but it's been rather difficult over the last few years, I have to say.
And I would love to finally meet in person, Sven.
Well, that would be good. I would look forward to that. But I guess there's no reason we can't keep in touch if there are questions or so forth. I'm just not allowed to contribute officially, that's all. Yeah, exactly. I can read the report. Yes, I've appreciated all of your inputs, and I have to say I've learnt a lot. Not just about the science, but also about the sort of process of this, which has been really helpful. So thank you all as well.
Thanks, sir.
Thanks, Finn.
Thank you.
Half an hour till bedtime.
Yeah, so we'll be in, correct. So we'll be in contact with you, and if you are able to present, it is going to be another virtual meeting, but if you're able to present the recommendations from the SRB to the interim meeting, and then also the annual meeting, that would be appreciated. That's right. So just the key recommendations. Well, and then you can also refer to some of the requests that you have assisted or directed the Secretariat to work on over the next little while. But it's up to you and the board exactly which ones of those you'd like to present. Cheers. Thank you.
Have a good one. Thank you.
Good to see you all.
All right. Bye.
Don't forget to send me the report, Olaf. There it is. I got it. Perfect.
I just sent it to everyone there.
Just arrived. Thank you.
Great. Take care, folks.
Bye-bye. Bye.